Здравствуйте, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let us begin our discussion. There aren't too many people in the room, and probably only people who are intently interested in the agenda items have come to listen to us. Let me introduce our panelists. Antonina Levashenko will be helping me to moderate this session. Why don't you introduce us? Hello. I'm Antonina Levashenko. I'm chief of the OECD Center at the Russian Academy of Civil Service. And here's Sergey, the rector of the Academy of Foreign Trade, and Alexey Moiseev is the Deputy Minister of Finance of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Volvach, Chief of Standards and International Cooperation Department of the Federal Tax Service. We also invited Pavel Livadniy to come and join us from Rosfin Monitoring. However, he had to attend an urgent meeting at the Foreign Ministry. Couldn't make it. We also have Anna Zemtsova, and she's the chief of the regulation department at the Deutsche Bank. We have several international guests from the OECD. Mathilde Menard, she's the deputy chief of the Finance and Investment Department and Entrepreneurship. Graciela Perez-Navarro, the deputy director of the Tax Policy and Administration Center OECD, and William Tompson, who is the chief of Eurasian Desk at the OECD Secretariat, who has spent years dealing with Russia. No, I have not overlooked you. And Vladimir Chikin. Vladimir Chikin is our close friend and colleague who has been helping us for 2 years to reform currency controls system in the Russian Federation. He's a partner at Goltsblat, BLP. Thank you. Let me do some brief opening remarks. Then we'll give the floor to other colleagues. We started looking into the foreign currency regulations issues about 2 or 3 years ago, when we drafted amendments to the law on foreign currency controls, a law and the amendments that made it more stringent. It was then that the amendments were drafted that all private individuals holding bank accounts abroad had to bring notarized copies to certify the account ownership. So that was really things that could not be realistically implemented. So what is a notarized copy of an excerpt from a bank account? Well, this is Well, it sounds ridiculous to me. Well, how about the translation? Now, at that time, we managed to review and cleanse that law from some excessive amendments. We convinced the Ministry of Finance to remove some of the proposed amendments. Then Vice Prime Minister Igor Shuvalov issued a set of recommendations to actually to improve our redrafting of that foreign currency law. So it turned out that the entire set of proposed amendments was not viable and was not welcomed by anyone. If we cast a general look at the system of foreign currency controls and regulations, we are basically talking about capital transactions controls. So, because currency controls internationally is becoming a thing of the past. After the Bretton Woods system was discontinued, originally, back in the 50s, the capital accounts were liberalized and capital account transactions were liberalized in developed countries. So at the same time, these currency controls were removed. And in the modern world, currency controls and currency restrictions on transactions are exceptional. Well, they may be imposed only at a time of crisis, and this doesn't happen often. In the Soviet Union, the state had a monopoly of all foreign currency transactions. Well, liberalization came in the 1990s. And, well, it existed for some time, and then it was curtailed. So after we actually eliminated the mandatory sales of foreign currency proceeds, we discontinued that. It is no longer there. However, all accompanying elements like the transaction passport, so to speak, and the mandatory repatriation of foreign currency proceeds, they're still in place. Why did it happen? I don't know. I would not know, and it's mystery to me. Because, well, why are they still there? Just because if we remove them, some people will lose their jobs. Or they cannot be discontinued or abolished just like that. They should be replaced by some other controls or some other regulations. So what are the problems associated with currency regulations? For legal entities, they are required to repatriate all foreign currency proceeds to Russia. Well, they are not supposed to sell all foreign currency proceeds. Well, there are very stringent regulations governing the keeping of foreign bank accounts for corporate entities. And I believe that no reasonable business person would venture to keep an open bank account abroad. For private individuals, all types of foreign currency transactions are allowed. So you can wire transfer any amount abroad. However, when it comes to foreign currency residents, and all Russian nationals are foreign currency residents, even though you may not be a resident of Russia. So, well, here is when restrictions come. And there are some restrictions on the keeping and operating their foreign bank accounts. Well, before, they didn't have any serious headaches associated with that. But in recent years, when we are now supposed to declare, to file a tax return or a declaration of all foreign currency transactions made abroad, for instance, you have a foreign bank account, and you transferred it to a bank account which is known to the tax service, and you have transferred some funds from Russia abroad. You purchased securities using those funds. Now, such private individuals is not authorized to sell those securities, because if he sells them, they need to remit all proceeds in Russia, and then to transfer the money back from Russia to his foreign bank account. This is next to impossible. I never succeeded in doing so. My friends never succeeded in doing so. Perhaps the transaction amount was very small, and if you're turning around millions of dollars, you may be able to do so, but not otherwise. But even if they remit your proceeds into transit accounts, then it will still be open in your name. And so the sanctions by the 100% fine, they would simply confiscate all such proceeds were supposed to. Well, this is totally unreasonable. And when we started sorting that out, we were really at a loss. Because, so there's no reason for those restrictions. Well, there are some people who say that foreign currency controls are essential. So what are the role? So what are they intended for? Because the original law on foreign currency was designed to assure the repatriation of foreign currency proceeds and the mandatory sale of foreign currency to the state. Now, well, some people believe that it is a tool of controlling dirty money. Look, well, there is another agency. It's called Rosfin Monitoring, and their counterparty banks. Well, they have the function, the banking supervision has a function of looking after the dirty money. Well, some people say that it is essential to introduce these controls so that we could keep an eye on the taxpayers' money. But look, well, there's a tax code to take care of that. Why should we introduce special laws and sets of regulations? And if you effected a wrongful transaction, why should the entire amount of this transaction be confiscated from you? Well, look, well, people are at a loss. There have been several amendments to that law which are still in limbo and which may be more beneficial. My personal opinion is that this law cannot be improved. It shall be totally eliminated, totally discarded. Well, there should be a separate system of controlling and eliminating dirty money. That's a totally different kettle of fish. And this should be affected via banking supervision and Rosfin monitoring. We should probably put a proper risk management system in place. And secondly, tax compliance. This is what it's all about. Even a notification of foreign bank accounts or an excerpt of your transactions, your receipt from a bank account, starting from 2016 or whatever, it is still redundant. It is redundant. We should not really nettle individuals because there will be some automatic exchange of banking transactions in place. That system is going to be in place starting this year. So we do not have to really nag at individual taxpayers. So I've attempted to give you a brief overview of the current situation, and we have got together, of course, I've simplified several things and omitted a lot of details because I don't want to take your time. So this brings me to the end of my opening remarks, and I invite our panelists to discuss several items on our agenda. What are the goals and purposes of currency controls, except for dirty money and tax issues? Second, the repatriation of foreign currency proceeds, transaction passport, and everything. Is there any sense in it? Thirdly, restrictions on the use of foreign bank accounts by private individuals and corporations. And finally, the automatic exchange of banking information. Is this system designed to resolve all the outstanding issues we're attempting to resolve otherwise? Yes, if I may. I would like to say a couple of words to draw the line, and then I'll pass the floor on to Vladimir Ivanovich. Just for the benefit of our international guests, international colleagues, when we talked with Grace and asked her to speak on foreign currency controls, she said, I'm not an expert in foreign currency controls. I said, look, well, there's a special story about foreign currency controls because it is so closely linked to tax liability. And what the previous speaker said, essentially, the law on foreign currency controls in terms of the tools it uses, is designed to deal with tax issues more than anything else. And it is designed to deal with issues like repatriations with no obligation to sell currency proceeds. Secondly, limitations on foreign bank transactions, because we have a list of transactions which you are allowed to effect using your foreign bank account. Well, it now is longer than before, and but there is an essentially restrictive approach to the possible uses of your foreign bank accounts. I believe that while the new amendments have caused many changes in the modus operandi of private individuals and corporations in the Russian Federation who are foreign currency residents. So unless you notify the tax office and submit a tax return, it is next to impossible to find out anything about your foreign bank account. That is the problem. So even if you impose such a provision, this provision will largely be not viable. I believe that it would make much more sense in liberalizing the currency regime, and we are hammering out a reform consisting of three major sets. First, starting from the year 2018, we suggest to include an open list of foreign bank transactions. And if government authorities, Ruslan monitoring of the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, and Federal Tax Office help us, that so much the better. So if there are some operations that are deemed risky, let us have a close-ended list so that people are free to make use of their funds deposited at foreign banks. And the second thing is that we should discontinue the requirement to repatriate foreign currency proceeds. Vladimir Ivanovich will tell us more about the risks associated with this, and Vladimir has worked with those who have actually suffered from the restrictive and repatriation mechanism. Yet another set of issues is linked to this automatic data exchange system, which is going to be in place this year. And after the system is in place, automatically private individuals and corporations should not be liable, should not be expected to file in tax returns. It is exactly what the OECD suggested. We may do this as a set of bilateral agreements. If we don't reach an agreement on the automatic data exchange transmission, then probably we should keep the existing procedures. No notification, no tax return.
Antonina, thank you very much for the chance to address this forum. I will try to make my presentation brief because I do have some slides to demonstrate to you. That would be nice. Well, yes, truly, something must be changed in the sphere of exchange controls. But I would propose a different idea. To change, we shouldn't change the federal laws on foreign exchange controls and foreign currency proceeds, but introduce amendments into the Code on Administrative Offenses of the Russian Federation. In my first slide, I give an answer to the question which is listed in our program. So what are the purposes of foreign exchange controls in the Russian Federation? So, in the preamble we see that why do we need the currency controls in the Russian Federation? To ensure the streamlined currency controls and ensure the stability of the Russian currency, and to stabilize the markets in the Russian Federation as a factor of progressive development in international cooperation. So how does the legislator try to attain these objectives? Maybe we should seek answers in the law. So if the law specifies the objectives and goals, so one could expect that in the body of the law itself, we would find specific examples of the means and instruments for the attainment of such goals and tasks. But that's something that we do not see in this law. Let's go back to International Monetary Fund. That are the main bases. And so Article 8, it imposes obligations to avoid limitations as far as current foreign exchange operations go. And that's so the Russian Federation. Previously, there was a division in the foreign currency legislation, a division between the movement of capital transactions and current operations. And such as for the capital transactions, they were limited by specific articles of the law on the foreign currency controls, and that those two articles expired on the 1st of January 2009, and so that's exactly, any restrictions or any limitations were removed on the 1st of January 2007 as far as capital accounts transactions go. That's the movement of capital. And so so that's great. We should rejoice. But there's only one restriction that remains, which is established by Article 11 of this law. That's the only ban, the only prohibition regarding foreign currency transactions which exists in this law. That's the ban to conduct currency exchange operations and transactions in the Russian Federation outside of authorized banks. So that's the only restriction which we can find in the federal law on foreign exchange controls. All the other things established with respect to foreign currency transactions, so such transaction must be conducted without any restrictions. So that the basic foreign exchange control principle. So those transactions which are not expressly prohibited or limited, restricted in any way by law, must be effected and implemented freely and openly. And that's something that Russia has agreed to as a member of the International Monetary Fund, because we don't have capital transactions, but all the other transactions, if they are not prohibited, are allowed. And so if Article 5 spelled differently, not the limits established by the agencies of foreign exchange control, but by the law in the respective sphere, that things would have been different, because, well, the law, this federal law, it just bans a free conversion of currency outside the authorized banks, and also the Article 11, that we're talking about the internal domestic currency market of the Russian Federation, subject to the entire federal law on the currency controls in the Russian Federation. But speaking about the enforcement agencies, that the customs service and the tax services, and I am responsible for the customs services first and foremost, treat this provision as extraterritorial in nature. So in other words, that's a ban to make settlements in foreign currency between residents, even if such transactions and settlements are conducted abroad, outside of the Russian Federation, and with the exception, with all the exceptions that are set forth in Article 19 and this of the same law. Article 19 establishes obligations as far as repatriation goes, and also the instances when one is allowed not to repatriate foreign exchange proceeds. For instance, like offsets. Well, some entities cannot engage in offsets, well, others can. And speaking about this instrument, those organizations which sell gas or deliver gas outside, abroad, they can use the offset mechanisms. Organizations which are involved in fishing outside the territorial waters of the Russian Federation or in international waters, yes, they can use the offset instruments, and construction companies which implement construction projects outside of the Russian Federation, that also are allowed to use this instrument. So the question, well, there arises, I have quite an unpleasant feeling about it. So we all have equal opportunities, and by law, we have equal opportunities and equal rights to engage in foreign trade activities. But nevertheless, here we see that some can enter into transactions and they use offset mechanisms in order to make settlements, and other entities can't do that. Well, certainly experts will say that such a key sector as gas sector and gas trading shouldn't encounter any restrictions and limitations as far as foreign trade goes. But gas is, let's say, holy cow. That's something that we cannot attempt to restrict. As far as the others go, they can do what they can, call for themselves. Next, restrictions. The restrictions were introduced. On the next slide, what's most interesting in my opinion, that's really interesting. That's the year 2008. Crisis has struck the world, and how did the currency legislation in Russia responded to the difficulties? It introduced amendments in Article 25 of the Code for Administrative Offences. If previously the fine was for violations of from 75 to 100% of the amount of such an illegal or unlawful transaction, nowadays, the amounts remain the same, but the list of prohibited and unlawful transactions was very unexpectedly, very suddenly extended. So previously the article read the use of unlawful foreign currency transactions, those transactions which were banned by the federal law on exchange controls, and was punishable by a fine up to from 75 to 100% of the unlawful amount. And so today the fines remain, because, well, now not banned transactions are included, but those transactions which were committed in violation or with violations of the effective legislation. So it's just outside of accounts in the authorized banks, or bank accounts located with the banks located in banks abroad. And so certainly when the legislation allows for such transactions to be and settlements to be effected, yes, then you can. But nevertheless, in order to do that, one has to have a foreign bank account. But so let's say, an unlawful transaction is a transaction that was forbidden by law. But now, you see, after this amendment was introduced in this article, so this unlawful transaction is as such a transaction which was forbidden by law, and secondly, which is a second type of transaction, those which were effected in violation of the regulations adopted by the appropriate authorities, whatever, and then all the further transactions which were illegally credited to the account in a foreign bank are also classified as illegal or unlawful transactions. For example, the sales of securities securities and the crediting of the proceeds of such sales on our foreign bank accounts. Right now, we can't do that. That's spelled out in the law. But as of the 1st of January 2018, one will be allowed to receive foreign currency proceeds that received from the sales of securities and using foreign banks. I'm an individual, for instance, I own some securities abroad, some equity. I sell this stake, and naturally I paid taxes. I paid my individual profit tax, but I received that those proceeds were credited to my foreign bank account, and I'm responsible for that within the range of 75 to 500% of the total amount of this unlawful transaction, despite the fact that I've already paid tax on that amount. Well, maybe I was lucky. Well, we see that the securities prices are going down, but maybe I was in luck, and the price went up. And so now the market value of securities may be going down, but it's going down in foreign exchange. But due to the differences in the exchange rate, that it's higher. And I was punished 3 times, actually, under this law. First, I committed an illegal transaction, and the money was credited to my foreign bank account. And technically, it would have been impossible to credit the same amount converted into Russian rubles in a Russian bank, because, well, purchasing some securities abroad, I rely on the services of professional brokers, and so brokers may be authorized banks, or they may be just private entities, and so brokers first credit the proceeds on their own accounts, brokerage accounts, but not and only then he transfers this money, this amount to my personal account, and I don't have the right. I don't have the right to credit this amount to my own bank account. And certainly I doubt that the broker that I'm dealing with would agree to directly transfer the appropriate proceeds to a Russian Federation bank. So that's, you see, that's something inappropriate. So all the limits and restrictions in this sphere, they will be lifted on the 1st of January 2018. And what would happen to me if I do such transactions now in 2017? Well, because it's prohibited. Actually, I have my doubts about the possibility to effect such transactions, which would be decriminalized in 2018, because well, it requires lots of lots of amendments to the requirements pertaining to financial statements, profit and loss accounts, and all the other financial records. And so I then envisage that violators of such rules may be tried and found guilty by the rules of this administrative code for, let's say, and so either the customs servants or the tax authorities would try and find me liable for some illegal or dubious transactions in line with foreign exchange transactions. So the law, the federal law on foreign exchange controls is if we go back to the concept which existed prior to 2009, so illegal transactions, foreign currency transactions, are only those which are expressly prohibited by the federal law. Yes, okay, that would have been logical, even if the federal law was phrased and worded in that manner, the way it was worded, because then it would have been useless and harmless. Well, not useless, but harmless, because then this snake would have lost its poisonous tooth. So that was one small article that was eliminated in 2009, and now you see 4 pages in very fine print. So that's actually where the threat lies. Being a defense attorney, I would say that this article is very formal in its nature. Well, I will remind you that there are substantive law articles, so there are some material, and there are also formal articles. As far as formal articles go, formal provisions go, I mean that any act or any event does not entail negative consequences for the perpetrator, so to speak. So, because form is something negative. So, punishment for this form is naturally the expression of excessive foreign currency controls, which and they don't have any practical restriction doesn't act, then we actually, both legal entities and individuals in Russia that are involved in businesses, they have to do a lots of things and to be very resourceful and inventful in order to avoid administrative liability under the effective law. But foreign residents don't need to do that. Again, disparity, inequality. And so can we go back to the first slide? And so on the so these are the purposes and targets of the foreign currency controls. So why do we need any restrictions as factors for ensure progressive development of national economy and international economic cooperation? So we have established objectives, so we have placed our hands in the handcuffs and we are just whipping and punishing ourselves in order to do what? In order to ensure factors of progressive development of the national economy and international economic cooperation. So it sounds and reads rather funny. And so here, and that's the one which I need here. So it so happens that we have established restrictions and bans, prohibitions. The party says that one cannot introduce restrictions on foreign currency current transactions, with the exception of very, exceptional cases. So the current law, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is in violation of Russia's obligations and commitments assumed within the framework of the International Monetary Fund. So it runs counter to the International Treaty of the Russian Federation. That's about all. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, президент.
Thank you indeed. I changed my seat just because it was easier to watch your presentation from out there. Would you please keep within your time limit? Otherwise, we will take far too long. Vladimir Ivanovich overviewed the issue of self-discriminations of foreign currency restrictions. The Central Bank of the Russian Federation is currently engaged in reviewing this OECD liberalization code. That is to mean that we are interested in this international instrument, and this code enabled a non-party to join this code, so that we are able to explain our position more. So I have a question about foreign currency restrictions. So we have a system of foreign exchange control in place. If we join this liberalization code, so how much are we going to be discriminated against others? How much will it undermine competition internationally for the Russian Federation? Thank you.
Nowadays, you have a lot of fears about financial stability, increased volatility, etc., on the markets, and thus, in this context, the introduction of capital for restrictions might look like an appealing and politically easy quick fix short-term and quick fix to deep-seated structural challenges. And indeed, since the crisis, the 2008 crisis, we have seen a rise in capital flow measures. And this is, and especially in the form of currency-based restrictions, not only in Russia. So this is reversing an historic trend, and it's a big concern for us. And we have done recently, but it's, you have a lot of course, research data. It's very mixed. You know, and in fact, greater capital the codes are even more, and because you have this temptation to increase the capital for restrictions, the codes are even more an interesting instruments. Because I think we need a cooperative and a prudent approach to long-term financial liberalization and integration. And in this sense, the codes, the OECD codes of liberalization of capital movement, they can serve as a conflict avoidance device, and to promote openness, transparency, accountability in managing capital movements. We had a big meeting in October where you had Ksenia Yudeeva from the central bank, Russian central bank, and she was very adamant in supporting the idea of the importance of opening capital accounts, etc. So the codes now, as you said, they are open to non-OECD countries, and we have already like 12 non-OECD but G20 members adhering to the codes, and we know we have been discussing with the Russian administration about this interest of Russia to potentially maybe join the codes. And we think that they offer the possibility of flexibility, and because you can reintroduce capital flow restrictions in specific circumstances under the codes with some reservations, and but provided that these are reviewed regularly and that they are proportional, they are not more restrictive than necessary, etc. And we have this peer review process that is typical of the OECD that allow us to ensure that we don't have bigger than ever policies regarding like capital flow restrictions. So in fact, the code help us, I mean the OECD countries and all the adhering parties to ensure that the international financial infrastructure enjoys transparency, accountability, also flexibility and proportionality. So these are three very: transparency, flexibility, proportionality. That's very important. And so when we are discussing with Russia or other currently non-adhering parties, we are highlighting how they could make use of the codes in their process of, financial liberalization somehow, because it's a multilateral commitment device. They provide also a transparent dialogue platform, and they might also be used as a positive signal to your commitment to financial liberalization, So currently we are reviewing the codes, and we are very happy that Russia intends to be very active in this revision of the codes, because the objective is to strengthen their relevance, to improve their clarity and predictability, and also to improve the transparency of specific measures introduced by adherents. So in this, and now I'm coming to the answer to your specific questions. In this revision, we intend, of course, it has still to happen, so it will be discussed by all the adhering parties and non-adhering like Russia. But because we already had preliminary discussion, we have some ideas where we might go with this revision. And so clearly one objective, and probably we will achieve that, is to confirm that the freedom of operations and their conclusion in different currencies is under the scope of the code. And key areas under consideration are related to foreign exchange restrictions. There are two main points. First, to reaffirm the broad scope of the codes. That means that this includes currency rules. This means that obligation to use a particular currency for denomination or settlements imposed by a country on its residents abroad. So that's pretty much to do with what you were just talking about, this would be a restriction in the codes, clearly. In terms of innovative financial instruments like derivatives, because they were not yet in existence when the last time the codes were reviewed in 1992, there is, I would say, an inclination, because of course this is subject to upcoming discussions, but to agree that the list of the code operations is comprehensive enough to include these new innovative financial instruments. And then another point that is important for Russia, I think, it's we want to develop the understanding of the treatment of the measures that have stated macroprudential objectives. And that's what was discussed by Ksenia Yudaeva in October in our meeting at Paris. And we think that the vast majority of macroprudential measures, they fall outside the scope of the codes. That means concretely that, for example, liquidity coverage ratios with differentiated by currency, or net stable funding ratios also differentiated by currency. So all these instruments that aim at managing the currency mismatch risks, this would not be considered as capital flow restrictions. That means that all these elements that are currently also used in the Russian context would fall outside of the scope of the codes. So we have, the one with stated macroprudential objectives. But this is a very hot topic in the discussion on the revision of the codes, and we have some member countries with whom we have difficult discussion on these ones. So that's where we think we will arrive at the end of the revision. But of course, because it all will depend on the adhering parties and the non-adhering parties, I mean, probably the input of Russia will be important also. Thank you.
Спасибо. Возможно, Федеральная налоговая служба захочет высказаться.
Perhaps the Federal Tax Service would like to make a few comments about the tax purposes of these foreign currency restrictions, and as to how critical, how essential it is to move those notification requirements to tax legislation rather than the foreign currency law. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you indeed for inviting me to join in. This is a highly debatable topic, and I'm afraid there are very few, if any, venues where these foreign currency restrictions are discussed at all. We definitely need more of such discussion opportunities. While we have quite serious panelists have gathered in this room, and so we are hopeful that we'll move ahead with that. Well, first, for the tax service has recently joined foreign currency controls discussion. Before that, we were only acted as a tax agent or foreign controls agent. This is a new role we have come to play. And hopefully, we shall be able to live up to expectations. In the meantime, we have been working very hard together with the Customs Office, which have much more experience than us in supervising foreign currency transactions. We want to coordinate our efforts and be very careful in what we do. When we are talking about our new legislation of foreign controls, the matter of opening foreign bank accounts and reporting on these foreign bank transactions, it so happened that this became part of the foreign currency law. Well, the legislature made it part of the foreign currency law for whatever reason, but I believe that you are right, and that, well, this law is much more relevant to the tax code, and while these new provisions have a more fiscal nature than anything else, And so all those notification, submitting tax returns, submitting notifications, submitting excerpts from the list of transactions or whatever are very serious issues which require a whole set of new regulations and bylaws. And we're being very actively involved in this process. So I believe that we need to draw the line between supervision over transactions on the one hand and the reporting of individuals and corporations on the list of foreign currency transactions. We are talking about the overall supervision and controls of the state, and this is something which is getting stronger and stronger internationally. So when we're talking about the reduced administrative and regulatory burden on individuals and corporations, so this burden as compared like 5 years ago and now are totally different. And the word burden has a different meaning. If like 5 years ago, all kind of reporting meant paperwork, envelopes, postal fees, the deadlines, and all the chores that need to be observed. Today, in this information age, well, voluminous information can be moved between like individuals and government agencies in the nick of time. And there is no burden, no administrative burden about that at all. So when it comes to defining burden, it's not a matter of whether you should or should not. It is only a matter of the format of data or information provision, so that it is quickly, easy, so it is quick, easy, and cheap. Well, we may make use of some e-services in some countries, as far as I know. Taxpayers, no matter whether they're a corporation or an individual, and a tax office are in the same network. And, well, they're on the same page tax-wise. And, well, the tax office can easily get access to the books of an individual or a corporation online. So much for the controls. It is very transparent on the one hand, and there is no burden about it on the other. So let's think burden in a different context. So if we are talking about the automation of tax returns and the bookkeeping, well, we weren't talking about burden at all. Or at least we're talking about it in different terms than 5 years ago. We should also take due note of this changed nature of the information technologies. When we're talking about foreign assets and foreign banks, we absolutely need this information. And the tax office and the foreign currency controls should be at one. And this is a positive step forward towards liberalization, because there will be fewer controlling agents. And this will be favorable to the business climate, because, well, compliance will be verified in terms of fiscal controls only, and only one fiscal authority will come to play. And I believe that you are totally right that starting from the year 2018, the automated data exchange will be in place via this common transmission system, which the OECD is working towards, and when it will apply common reporting standards. The first thing to think about when the system is in place, we will then probably be able to discontinue any requirements that taxpayers should come and provide those notification and tax reports to us. However, while taxpayers need to get prepared, and they need to actually to absorb the idea that this automatic data exchange system is already a reality. It is the order of the day. And I don't think I'm revealing a secret, but we are working hard with the OECD Secretariat. We're compiling a list of countries that plan to exchange that CRS information. I believe that almost all 100 countries have confirmed their willingness to exchange financial data with us, except for those who have not yet joined MCA. We're talking about just a handful of countries, and while 2 years will be more than enough to make a deal with them, I believe that our individuals and our businesses should be prepared, because they won't feel easy when we find out about their foreign bank accounts from someone else, not from them. They will feel very uncomfortable in the first place. I believe that a Russian national or a tax or a currency resident will feel very uneasy if the Russian tax office finds out about his foreign bank transaction from the data transmission system.
Well, and the thing is that, some serious banks must inform their clients about this changes in the situation. So they should warn their clients that as of next year, they'll be sending out information to the public authorities and tax authorities. And remember, in last summer, we had a very interesting discussion, which is focused on this topic. And then I would just reiterate my personal approach, and I speak not as an official, but executive official, but as a government official, but as a person. So where should we migrate? Where should we move? So we've got to get away from the duplication of functions and regulations on the one hand, and on the other hand, we've got to strive to attain deeper transparency. So the regulations, excessive regulations, must be replaced by a higher degree of transparency. When the taxpayer, be it individual or corporations, should open his or her personal account, personal page on the internet, and then would get all the information that they need to receive from the state, from the government, and from the bank, and the same applies to financial institutions. So if such transparency is achieved through the actions of foreign or domestic banks and enforcement organizations, then, there's no problem. And remember, for a long time, information about the Russian bank accounts was channeled to the tax authorities via two channels. The first channel, that's the information which is stated in tax returns, and legal entities had to, within 5 days of the opening of the bank account, inform the tax authorities regarding this new account. And banks also had to provide this information to the tax authorities within 3 or 4 or 5 days. And at that time, everybody was so afraid that some pieces of information would be missing. That's why they used these two channels of information. But if, for instance, at that time, in order to open a bank account took several days for corporations, then nowadays it's just a matter of, hours, or it's sort of different. So the bank, once an account is open, opened automatically sends this information, which is required by law, to the tax authorities. And so we actually decided to do away with this particular requirement about notification, and because we don't need any additional data, the second channel, that's notification from the taxpayers. And so if we have sufficient information from authorized banks and financial institutions and credit institutions, then we do not require any other burdens in the by way of notification from individuals. But Dmitry, I would like to still ask you the following questions. Do you see any risks as far as foreign bank account transactions go? I mean, are there any, from the tax point of view, tax administration point of view, transactions which are risky? Well, you see, here the situation is just the same. When we start any discussion regarding transactions, the transactions to disburse foreign currency from your own foreign bank account. So if you, there is no limitation. So if you have transferred your cash from a foreign bank account to the bank in the Russian Federation, which is an authorized bank handling such transactions, then there are no problems. And so I think that there's quite easy as far as the transborder regulation goes, and particularly nowadays. As for sort of crediting bank accounts as far as certain amounts go, because, well, then we started analyzing various transactions, and only 3 types of transactions should be allowed, in our opinion. So first, when a person is abroad and is sort of selling either real estate, a house, property, or a car, and it's very difficult to explain to his vis-a-vis abroad that this money should be transferred either to Moscow or to St. Petersburg or to another city and bank. As for the sale of securities, well, I think that the example that was presented here about the use of broker, because the individuals also have individuals and legal entities also have broker accounts in foreign banks, but the broker and the would have to transfer an appropriate amount to your own Russian authorized banks. Well, I don't think that there would be any difficulty here, because if you notify the broker, provide him with your bank details in Russia, then it could be done. But nevertheless, well, business community believes that the 3 types of transactions should be relieved of any restrictions, and if I'm not mistaken, let's say a draft law, an appropriate draft law has been, rather not a draft law, but amendments to the existing federal law have been completed, and there are no rational people who would oppose such amendments, and this is the review of the law. I am all for openness and equality, but when the question was raised, tell us what should be permitted, and when in our conversation with the business community, they just limited themselves to these 3 transactions. And we've been working, we've been talking with the business community for the past 3 years, and certainly, okay, let's try and extend this liberty, so to speak, and remove restrictions further on. But again, I'm being honest with you. I cannot give you any other transactions except for the 3 ones that I mentioned. And so, well, the Russian bank account must be used as far as fund transfer goes anywhere, abroad or domestically. So, well, such bans and restrictions, including financial bans and banking bans and restrictions, may also correlate with the respective country, foreign state, wherein such transactions are committed. Very often, certain transactions cannot be effected in foreign countries because they are forbidden by Federal Law 173. but because you would face lots of prohibitions relating to the currency, foreign currency control, and financial regulation rules, and etc., which are effective in the respective foreign country. And so I believe, I'm sure, that if you try to violate such rules, you could encounter more difficulties and, let's say, unpleasant repercussions as compared to the Russian Federation. Thank you. And now, the Deputy Minister of the Finance of the Russian Federation, Alexey, we've been waiting for you. And so, we have two purposes. Why do we need the foreign currency controls law? And you are the #1 agency which is responsible for all such financial things here. And so let me start with some critical remarks. First and foremost, I agree with my colleague from the Tax Authority in the fact that when we were developing the first draft law, and the Ministry of Finance proposed a full elimination or cancellation of this list of allowed transactions and then migrate to the list of prohibited transactions. So there was a voting round, and then, didn't work. And so it was decided just to try and introduce the changes and amendments piecemeal. And so we started those polls or canvassing business circles about what you need, which transactions you think should be relieved of any restrictions. Why we're talking about 2018? The thing is that the system of transparency within the banking sector and financial transactions will become effective in January 2018 within the BRICS countries. And so, the first situation was 3 transactions we have identified. Secondly, what's also another obstacle which requires review, that would be the matter and the status of residents, so the calculations are made there differently and calculated differently, the tax periods, because there is so 6 months in Russia and 6 months abroad, and so let's say speaking about foreign or domestic residents and how the calculations of taxes are made. And so later on I will express the general opinions regarding this too, but right now, so there are laws. Laws exist for some purpose, so we cannot cancel it right now. We cannot circumvent this law, whatever. And let's speak about the situation. So right now, all those amendments that we have been discussing, some of those amendments, we hope that would go through all the hearings at the State Duma, and so that we could improve the situation of individuals, so that we could, as of the 1st of January next year, 2018, we'll simplify the transactions for individuals. But then, strictly speaking, if we are honest and compare the draft law, which is being discussed right now, which we hope would become effective in 2018, or any those laws which are effective right now, if we compare all the terms and conditions for individuals, I don't really see how which transactions might be allowed or right now, we cannot really abandon the entire list of prohibited transactions, but at least we can shorten it. So the 2 articles that were cancelled, and there are 2 articles which are being added. So they pertain to transport means, vehicles, and real estate property. So, secondly, the question was to Vladimir. So, which securities that you purchased or sold abroad lost their value? Well, I know here, vice versa, that all the securities they were gaining in their value and in prices accordingly, in particular in ruble equivalent. Well, it was 2 years ago, actually. In 1991, we didn't have a forex and we didn't have a stock exchange in this country at all. So Let's not look back that far. And so in terms of the ownership of foreign currency securities or securities denominated so we first and foremost, all the securities and all the revenues from proceeds from securities and securities yield is taxable according to the Russian Federation and the tax legislation. And so that's one thing. Secondly, we have, let's say, a draft law. Let's say previously we had a more radical draft law proposed by the Ministry of Finance as compared to the present one. We have a large number of mechanisms and instruments that allow people to voice their opinions about what they like, what they dislike. Right now, we see quite a number of electronic petitions or motions and signatures collected about certain laws. And, well, I'm not going to say which law right now is being, let's say, discussed because, well, the appropriate number of signatures was collected in order to review this law because it's considered by public opinion, it's considered to be too strict, and that's why, well, all the procedures are in place, and now we are starting this legislative work on the law. But as for the foreign currency control law, everybody, if we speak about kitchen economy and kitchen talk, knows very well what's listed there. And so, but then again, RSPP, Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, knows that this is one venue. Then the APORA organization is also another venue where they have been discussing all those issues, amendments, prohibitions, bans, etc., etc. For years, and we urged them to submit very specific, very concrete proposals, and because otherwise all this effort would narrow down to useless verbiage. We would just sit, discuss things, and would, unless we have a real thing. So when we hear such phrases as everybody wants, well, this bans lifts, but who's they? Everybody. Who's they? Could you enumerate? So what? That's what I meant when I talk about specifics. And so my request is to everybody about that. Well, let's say be active, demonstrate your active position and status as a citizen, but nevertheless try and behave within the existing framework, legal framework, because, well, you've got to. The law, which I didn't want to mention, so let's say it's now, the initiative, was supported by the appropriate number of signatures, and now it's in the plans for review at the State Duma. So again, if you want to notify someone about strict rules or unnecessary or whatever rules, then write letters. Notify Minister of Finance, President of the Russian Federation, appropriate authorities, the head of the tax authorities, Customs Office, etc., etc. Just write letters, because otherwise, well, we have to be very specific and very concrete, because, well, there are certainly certain measures of control which are burdensome for individual entrepreneurs and for legal entities, and, well, that's something that we've been working on. This new draft law has been almost completed. All the appropriate agreements and have been collected, and we hope that we will formally submit it for legislative discussion. And we also propose a wider list of industries and entities that could use the offsetting principles and instruments in their settlement procedures. And there are some proposals that strictly relate to small and medium-sized enterprises, and also another proposal which concerns the requirement to repatriate the proceeds from foreign trade foreign trade operations. If somebody, some entity sells their products for Russian rubles, then they would be able to repatriate it in rubles or yuan, RMB, and so this tradable pair of currencies, ruble and yuan, they've been developing and showing quite very good results, but nevertheless we've got still further to improve the situation around such proceeds and such currencies. And finally, the conceptual view, as we do have lots of rudiments as far as the foreign currency control goes, but we nevertheless need this law, and because, well, although to a large extent, largely, it's a historical rudiment, but it doesn't mean that we have to cut it off. Maybe we've got to rewrite it and review it, because lots of laws, let's say the law of 1992 about the fundamentals of insurance business, it's just, well, the title remains the same, but the law is totally different from the one that was back in 1992. The Ministry of Finance, which is an agency responsible for law drafting initiatives, is very actively looking into those challenges and problems that we face, and we hope that very soon we will fill in those gaps that we still identify in our environment. And as for foreign currency controls law, I think I don't remember. You mentioned, I don't remember who specifically mentioned the tools and instruments of the foreign controls law. It should be, such instruments and tools should be linked to the tax administration or somehow matched and fitted into the framework of the tax administration. But you must understand that the situation that Russia is in and through which it has passed previously during the previous 2 years, then the lawmakers, when they think about and when they talk about foreign currency, their first and foremost idea is let's introduce more bans, let's say, and let's make things stricter. Everybody remembers the situation in the market 2 years ago. I think that any tougher measures or tougher prohibitions or bans will improve the situation, will change it for the better. But there is a lawmakers' inertia because they sort of give arguments that are being scolded and criticized for this perpetual reform of the pension system, and now they insist that let's let something do consecutively and successfully, and that should be the foreign currency controls area.
The final thing I wanted to say is that 1 year ago at the Gaidar Forum there was a discussion on ratings. And this was a very late discussion, and people were reluctant to attend. And still, we explained what we're going to do about the rating system together with the central bank. And when we did what we had promised, everyone said that we would never announce that. Unfortunately, we said we did, but there were fewer people in the audience than panelists last year. So we have a very good memory, you know. And so we have now announced what we're going to do. Please take notes. Keep that in mind. Otherwise you'll say that you'd never known about that. So thank you for coming. Thank you indeed. I agree with most of what you have said. But I believe that if we do not insist on revoking this law, we would have hardly won any of your attention on the course of liberalization. So, please, well, this requires no comment. So we need to be proponents of more radical things, so that you still apply your gradual approach. I think that we should be vocal in our civil protest for you to listen. And so I'm being very crude, I realize that. So please do not respond immediately, just think about it. Keep that in mind too. There was a, what was it? Communication tube or whatever. There was a communication portal. So there is a portal, a civil society that is transmitting things to the government. So your CSR is also trying to transmit certain things and ideas to the government. And after it goes through the communication tube, so please keep trying, keep trying. Thank you, Alexey Vladimirovich. Let me explain this one again. We have this Strategic Development Center. We are working hard to draft this reform, and we are working towards this reform. We really want to realize what kind of foreign bank transactions you perceive as dangerous or risky. These are the questions we keep asking Rosfin Monitoring and the Ministry of Finance and the Tax Office and the Central Bank. And people keep telling us that, yes, please give us more ideas how we could expand the list of authorized operations. But what we sincerely do not understand is, why don't you change the approach? Why are you being so restrictive? Why do we have to think about what kind of transactions are allowed? Everything's allowed, except for a few things which are restricted. And, well, this is a different approach, which may be much more beneficial. So you have this money laundering authority, and then you actually have a whole list of suspicious transactions, offshore accounts, offshore entities. So you do have a whole set of recommendations and criteria. Why don't we have this kind of discussions in order to compile a list of those scary transactions that must be banned, whereas everything else should be allowed by default? Yes, I really apologize. I wanted to use this opportunity to ask you a question. You said today that we did consider changing this principle, but something prevented you from it. I would venture to ask this question: what was exactly that did not allow you to change this approach? No, I'm not going to tell you. No. I won't tell you. I'm not authorized to disclose that. However, what was best, this social conservatism or social liberalism? Conservatism, of course. So if people are conservative in a healthy way, it may be a good thing. Try something less, and then venture something more. I believe we feel it easier at the Ministry of Finance because we are not into supervision. But people who are in charge of supervision, they will be held responsible. So people are hiding away their funds from the financial markets, from the capital markets, and the currency controls are tracing those unlawful transactions. And you say that we have this money laundering authority. That's the authority was in charge of money laundering. That was funny, yes. Look, just imagine that you would offer to take away these batons from the traffic police. I think that, yeah, that may be a lucrative idea, but a lot of people would be against it, just because of their natural conservatism. So what's the biggest problem? The biggest problem is that some people who are happily living abroad and never thought that they would have some problems with dealing with managing their bank account. This is the big problem. So I believe that this is the problem we must resolve before the end of 2017, while all other problems can wait a little. Thank you for your detailed reply. Well, a lot of things have been said about banks. Let me pass the floor on to Deutsche Bank, the department who is in charge of currency controls and regulations, Anna Alexandrovna. What are your difficulties? What are your challenges? The problems you are faced with? And what would you like to improve as a bank? How would you like to facilitate your life? And any wishes for liberalization at all? Thank you. Thank you indeed. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity to listen to totally different opinions, especially newly established currency control authorities. For many years, we have been living in an isolated space. We are normally interacting with the Bank of Russia and the Rosfin Budget Nadzor, the budgetary supervisory authorities, and every time we effected a transaction which appeared unorthodox to supervisory authorities, our clients felt obliged to go to a supervisory authority directly and consult them. I believe that this supervisory authority did a lot of good things for the evolution of foreign exchange controls. I don't think that we should begin considering currency control issues from the year 2008. I believe that we should start much earlier when foreign trade become accessible to all. We lived through several patches of very stringent and harsh currency controls. Well, first and foremost, some foreign trade participants did not quite understand what a foreign trade contract is. Well, some of the foreign trade tools are used more than others, some are less than others. In all, restrictions and limitations, although my angle of vision may be very narrow, because I live in the world of corporate clients, I would support Dmitry in saying that I would hardly name any financial transaction of a corporate client from the law in 2013 that some corporate accounts would like to offer in addition to the existing list. I don't think so. I believe that all transactions that they require are allowed to them. They're all authorized when it comes to foreign bank accounts. When it comes to repatriation, so I believe that repatriation has been and is a tool of reforms which is still underway, and our reforms which is underway to instill greater anti-money laundering regulations. So when we have a good set of regulatory tools to control and expose suspicious transactions, I believe that when this is true, and when this part of legislation prevails in our set of bylaws and regulations, then this current set law of foreign controls becomes a thing of the past. I further think that it will be made part and parcel of the anti-money laundering and tax avoidance legislation. I believe that companies that will be engaged in foreign trade and that their engagement in foreign trade is specifically mentioned in the Articles of Association, then I believe we will be in a good position to remove all those process repatriation restrictions. Before that, I don't think that we should revoke those repatriation regulations, because I don't think what else can be used instead of that. Oh. Well, look, what is repatriation? At the end of the day, it means that you must return the money to your bank account within a certain deadline. However, after this deadline is over, you can remit this money abroad again. Is that correct? Yes. When we discussed this repatriation mechanism with stakeholders and Ruslan monitoring, we only heard one argument. Repatriation is only necessary to keep the high level of liquidity in the Russian banking sector. So Ruslan monitoring may be talking about money laundering or anti-money laundering. However, the very concept of foreign currency proceeds repatriation is formally treated in a totally different context. It is treated as a tool of supporting the liquidity of the financial sector in Russia. And why should corporations actually serve this repatriation mechanism? Yes, let me tell you this. Large companies have to keep huge departments of people who are only busy generating foreign currency reports. That is all. And this is exactly the extra burden we talked about, which is associated with repatriation. This is the first thing. Look, we weren't discussing the very restriction, the very concept of repatriation. Yes, we do. We do discuss the concept of repatriation and reporting mechanism. The requirement to repatriate proceeds in the Russian Federation is a restriction on current currency transactions that should not be there. By the virtue of what we said in the future. Yes, we have heard your position, and you referred to the law on currency regulations and the ban on current foreign exchange transactions, and still I don't think I fully agree with you. I don't agree with you in that the client must remit funds to a bank account in an authorized bank. I believe that, again, as a concept of eliminating these shadow transactions, if a resident counterparty has a liability to pay, an obligation to pay, then they must remit the funds to our resident counterparty, to a bank account in the Russian Federation. This may not be so good. However, that should be an incentive for the resident to prepare a much more detailed foreign trade contract and to work closely with his foreign counterparty. This may be a good thing. Look, well, here's what happens. If, as a corporation, you need to comply with these repatriation requirements, well, this is something that may not depend solely on yourself. Because, well, an entrepreneur may be subject to counterparty risks, and then your counterparty has failed to pay you in time. So they paid you late. And this is part of his entrepreneurship risks. Well, the counterparty bank was not up to the mark, and the funds were not remitted by the deadline. Oh, well, this means that you have you carry your own entrepreneurial risks because you have failed to be paid. And at the same time, you are liable under the foreign currency controls, and you will pay the same amount as an administrative fine. Look, we looked into that issue very carefully, and we received an opinion from the Ministry of Justice and others. And this is an administrative infraction. If a foreign bank has not remitted this to you, then you are not to blame. You are not liable. I'm sorry. Objection, please. Objection, Liz. As regards the blame, are we talking about individuals or corporations? So it is either negligence or premeditated intent. With a corporation, things are totally different, and they are liable and they are guilty of an administrative infraction if they had an opportunity to comply with the norms and regulations, which are under the code of the administrative infractions. However, they had failed to make all best efforts in order to comply. In Article 19 of this law on foreign currency controls, well, there is a provision, it is Article, that's the code, the administrative code, 1525. It said that if I have insured my liability, then I am exempt from administrative liability. Still, I am held liable as a corporation for non-repatriation of foreign currency proceeds. And I say, look, my best efforts are there, and the judge or the customs officer, the other party, tells me, did you have an opportunity to get insured against the default of the other party? Yes, technically I did. So means no best efforts. You are guilty. And so a corporation is deemed guilty. What I'm trying to say that economically it makes no sense for me to sign this insurance contract because my entire margin will be eaten up by the insurance premium. And I will not be able to fully eliminate my liability, and if I do, I will have no profits. Whereas the only purpose, the sole purpose of a corporation is to make profits. So, by complying with administrative requirements, I will be in violation of the very purpose of a corporation to make profits, and then I will be unable to pay the profit tax. A defense attorney, impossible to argue. However, I have a lot of statistics. We have many clients, and we deal with many other major banks like Raiffeisen or Unicredit. Look, the actual non-repatriation of foreign currency proceeds, and we are reporting infractions every month. And we have some procedures we have received from the central bank. And the Federal Tax Office was actually overwhelmed with piles and piles of report. No, look, we have two other people to report. No, look, let me say, this repatriation procedure, it is totally horrendous. It is horrendous. It's out of the Stone Age. Well, there's nothing to discuss here.
So let's speak about the automated instruments of the system of automated exchange of information. And Grace, I would like you to explain what difficulties the country may run into when adopting this automated information exchange system. And secondly, whether this system of automatic exchange of tax information can replace those state statements and records that the individuals and corporations have to submit right now to the tax authorities? I mean, how the information, will it be sufficient?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I don't want to talk about the difficulties that will arise in the context of the implementation of automatic exchange. Instead, I want to talk about the benefits that countries all around the world will receive as a result of implementing automatic exchange of information. When I first started working at the OECD on exchange of information, we recognized that this type of exchange of information, where you have the banks of one country reporting to their national tax authorities the assets, the interest earned, and other information about those foreign bank accounts to their local authorities so that it can be transmitted to foreign authorities, we recognize this would be very useful to tax authorities. Why? Because as much as exchange of information on request, that is when one tax authority has uncovered a suspicious transaction, can be useful, when you receive this information automatically and are able to match it automatically with your national records, that is far, far more efficient. And today we have not only the international standards to do this, but we are also working on the technological system to enable countries to match this information with their local records. And so this is going to dramatically change things. It has not yet been implemented, but maybe I can give you a few fast figures so that you understand how important it is and how valuable this will be to Russia and all of the other countries participating in this initiative. We have 137 countries and jurisdictions, including all tax havens around the world, as members of our global forum on transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes. All of those countries and jurisdictions have committed to implement exchange of information on request and exchange of information on an automatic basis. Now, developing countries have not been given a deadline within which to do it because they may not have the legal infrastructure or the administrative capacity to handle automatic exchange of information in the way that a more developed country would, including, importantly, maintaining the confidentiality of that information. But we do have 101 countries and jurisdictions, Russia included, that have committed to implementing the standard in 2017 or 2018. And the countries that have committed to doing so in 2017, meaning they're going to start exchanging that bank account information this year, are well on their way to implementation of that standard. And those who have committed to 2018, like Russia, are in the process of putting in place all of the international instruments, the domestic legislation, and the administrative procedures to be able to do so. But once they have this, they will be able to match this information with the information received from their taxpayers. What does this do? First, it deters tax evasion because the taxpayer now has a much higher risk of getting caught. Second, to the extent someone is willing to play Russian roulette with the tax system and that information, the tax authorities will have the ability to match that information and catch the taxpayers. They will have that information. So this is a quite extraordinary system that we are putting in place. And I should mention that the system, the automatic exchange of information system, the IT system we're putting in place, can also be used to share other types of information. We have developed standard technological templates for this, so you can share, and some countries already do, share information about sales of property, so the amount of properties sold, and other types of information of that nature. So this is really a major innovation. Yes, there are transition issues and there are some challenges in implementing this, namely that you have to get all of the legal instruments in place. You have to make sure you have arrangements with the foreign countries that you want this information from. We have established a multilateral convention, which Russia has already signed and ratified, which already has 108 countries and jurisdictions participating in that convention to enable this and other types of information exchange. So there are extraordinary opportunities through this type of exchange. The challenges will be in the implementation. Yes, financial institutions will face some challenges, but on the other hand, they were already going to be implementing the US system known as FATCA, the Foreign Account Compliance System. So this is just taking that type of system, creating one single international standard, one single IT template, and expanding it around the world. So that's far more efficient than if we had had a situation where each country developed their own automatic exchange system with their own particularities. Then you would have had chaos and unbelievable burdens on banks.
Грейс, такой небольшой вопрос. Правильно ли мы понимаем, что вот этот...
Grace, do we understand correctly that this multilateral agreement, the convention that you mentioned, that says, at least, among other things, that if a country does not comply with the information confidentiality agreement, then the Organization for Economic OECD that would be monitoring the performance by any country regarding its commitments, and so it can stop or suspend the use of this automated system regarding this particular country.
We are currently in the process of evaluating countries with respect to automatic exchange and with respect to whether they have the legal and administrative procedures in place to protect the confidentiality of the information. The information that is exchanged can only be used for the purposes for which it was exchanged, and generally because this information is exchanged through either bilateral tax treaties or our multilateral convention, that will be limited to tax purposes. There is an exception in our multilateral convention to use the information for non-tax purposes, such as to combat money laundering, corruption, etc., but only where the counterparty authorizes that use and they have similar provisions. So confidentiality is extremely important. We have, as I said, our global forum. One of the important things that our global forum does is carry out a peer review of all of the jurisdictions in how they implement both the exchange of information on request, but also the automatic exchange of information. And if a country does not comply with the confidentiality provisions, then the information exchange will not occur if it hasn't started, and if it has started and there are problems, it will stop. But from the very beginning, before the exchange starts, we are doing an assessment within the Global Forum of the confidentiality requirements and whether they have been met.
Да. И последний маленький вопрос. Насколько известно...
And one more question. We know that multilateral automated information exchange instruments also have something to do with the offshore jurisdictions, the so-called zero jurisdictions. And so this would be a unilateral provision of information. So they would not be receiving, those offshore jurisdictions would not be receiving information from the banks that are the signatories of this agreement because they carry the offshores bear certain risks pertaining to the tax collection because they also will have to fulfill certain agreements and commitments.
The offshore jurisdictions that are zero tax jurisdictions, so have zero income tax, will not be receiving information because they have no legitimate interest in receiving the information. Now, if there is, say, some type of VAT, they may have some interest, but in general, they won't be receiving the information. It will be going one way. But nevertheless, they do have an obligation, and they have committed, they are part of the 101 jurisdictions that will be implementing this in 2017 or 2018, they do still have the obligation to be sending that information to other countries. Which countries? What is the obligation in terms of which countries you have to have agreements with? It's with appropriate partners, relevant partners, and that is determined by whether or not another country has asked you. So if Russia has asked Cyprus or the Cayman Islands or Switzerland for an agreement, then there needs to be an agreement in place, or that will be negatively rated in the Global Forum peer review.
Спасибо, Грейс.
Антонина, можно я на эту тему просто по ситуации в России, поскольку в России мы находимся, просто кто-то знает, кто-то не знает, что поскольку мы являемся активными
I
участниками.
would like to add that Russia is a member of the multilateral forum on the exchange of such automated information pertaining to transparency of such data. So we have gone through 2 rounds of reviews, and Russia was awarded the status of largely compliant back in 2002, and so consequently we are within the group of quite serious and reputable players and agents, and we have completed the review regarding information protection and security insurance with the OECD experts, and we have received very high ranks, and those people and experts that conducted this review said that having learned our practices, that they were very satisfied with our practices, and so the country went through the working group of the forum, and now Russia was put into the list of those countries that have demonstrated compliance and commitment to protect information and fulfill all the obligations regarding this document. And now let me give the floor to William Tompson. He's a unique representative of OECD because he's been working with Russia and in Russia for many, many years, and we would like to hear his opinion regarding the effective legislation regarding the financial foreign exchange controls. And thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity to speak and for the invitation to take part in this panel discussion. And since our colleagues have all expressed their opinions, both formal and informal, I can afford to speak and express my personal opinion. So historical approach, you mentioned this instrument, that this is a Stone Age instrument, but it did exist during the Roman Empire, and with the exception of Egypt, Egypt was excluded from the uniform monetary system of the Roman Empire. Egypt had its own currency and very strict rules regarding the reports about all the money flows and commodity flows within the Roman Empire. So let's say, well, Roman Empire was first to give us legislation in the sphere of foreign currency control. And so speaking about seriously in Russia, about Russian legislation and the development of the banking and financial systems in Russia, and it's been for over 20 years that I wrote a lot of articles and prepared lots of documents regarding the system of foreign currency controls. And now I see that great progress has been made during the 20 years, but some instruments remain as they were introduced at the very beginning of this market period. And so, certainly there are standard reasons for adopting such measures. Well, I hear all those arguments, but nevertheless, as far as logics and common sense goes, then there is no common sense about keeping some instruments, because, well, we hear, let's say it's one of the instruments to combat money laundering activities, etc., etc. But how what can I say here? So this instrument certainly would find its place in history as an important financial and regulatory history, but it doesn't mean that it sometimes cannot be altered. I will give you some examples about France. Let's say France, through the tax system, through social transfers and special measures of providing social services. France has been quite successfully supporting and promoting birth rates. Does it have anything to do with the foreign currency control? Well, on the face of it, no. But 150 years ago, after the French lost in the war against the Germans, the French understood that they should generate soldiers at a faster pace as compared to the Germans. And so the first necessity was just to ensure a fast birth rate for the purposes of the military agency. And next, the purposes and objectives changed. But the thing is that for lawmakers, sometimes it's more difficult to change the instruments and tools rather than objectives and goals. And so that's why I started with the historical background of the issue, because it exists in Russia, it still remains, but I don't think that it will survive for a long time in the future. There are quite several issues pertaining to that. So we've heard them during this discussion, but the question of, let's say, currency resident as compared to the tax resident sounds very strange, and it seems very strange because I live in 3 countries and I have tax returns in 3 countries, so I have 2 financial years, fiscal years, and 3 foreign bank accounts, and so I pay very strict attention to all those, let's say, financial fiscal years, when they begin, when they end, etc. So if I were treated not as a foreign non-resident or resident non-resident taxpayer, then I would spend hours, more than 24 hours a day, trying to calculate and take into account all the requirements of legislation and all the reports that I have to fill out, because, well, people work in the United States, in Europe, in different countries, etc., etc. And so, but my question to the floor and to you all, to the panel, is whether this topic would be hot, whether we would still be discussing this topic in 5 years' time from now, because just look at the Bitcoin, the new transactions, and new cash flows, and new virtual currencies are being invented and being created. And if you still think that they are not serious, then I urge you to watch current news from China, because last year China tried to toughen up the system of foreign currency controls, for the simple reason that the Bitcoin price in China rose, skyrocketed, and everybody tried to avoid taxes by buying Bitcoins. And now the China authorities are trying to do something with this Bitcoin, and so that's a type of currency.
The Chinese authorities do not exactly know what to think about Bitcoins. Those people who are thinking about this are trying to find a uniform approach. There are several regulatory authorities in the United States which are busy trying to work out policies towards that, and still they use different approaches. They don't even know, they have not come to an agreement whether Bitcoin is property or currency. I believe that in the future years, such issues will become much more topical for Russia. I think we have used up our time. One sec, please, because, William, you have touched on an issue which was not raised before. And we have not mentioned it, and it is so important. I think I would have held myself if it was not for William. Look, everyone's talking about currency controls and regulation, and still those countries which do not require any additional instruments to improve their capitalization in the world trade. When you mention China, particularly when it comes to the Bitcoin opposition, Bitcoin feist, China also introduced the yuan as in the basket of the regional currencies, and this is a great achievement of the Chinese economy. If we look at the reasons of why Chinese did so, you will see that it was mainly for the measures of foreign currency restrictions and regulations. So I believe that we should not actually close this discussion. The role of foreign currency controls is still relevant for international trade. I think this is a much debatable issue. Thank you. Dear colleagues, thank you so much. Thanks everyone.